I am very much a newbie to cannabis, so this is my first conference, my first cannabis drinks conference, and I joined the cannabis industry about 4 months ago maybe, so in September. And so in thinking of speaking to you guys today, me talking about anything cannabis would just be a complete fraud because you all know way more about cannabis than I do in here. So I have, though, worked for some really big brands out there, Target. I've worked for McDonald's, most recently Molson Coors. So hopefully today I can kind of share with you guys some of those strategies, what people do in those industries, and hopefully it can help, propel your brands to be those big brands that you hope to be. So recently at PharmaCann, though, in my last couple months there, we've been super busy. And so with that, we recently announced an acquisition of LiveWell, and so that's just great for us because that's going to take us to a next level, expand us beyond just the East Coast market and take us to Colorado. So not a ton solidified just on that, but we're super pumped there. Next, we also launched Whole Flower in New York. So that's been something that's about 5 years in the making for us. It's pretty huge. We launched with our sativa, PSH, pineapple, silver haze, and now we've got a sativa, indica, and hybrid, more to come there. And just, as we all get excited and ready for New York to go rec, we're getting really pumped and want to really show that commitment to that location, or that market. And then we launched we're launching more new locations, especially in Pennsylvania. So all of this is a bit of a humble brag, I hope, kind of just to show you guys what's going on at PharmaCann and Verilife and Matter. I have to give a shout out. But I think with that, I'm just trying to say, at the dispensary level, we're super busy. PharmaCann is considered a big cannabis brand, but we're still super lean. We're still running around scattered half the time. There's people from my team here that are literally, putting out fires as I speak. So with that, then what do we know about the drinks market? And so we do know that there is a big opportunity to grow here. I've heard a couple of different numbers around how big cannabis is, or cannabis drinks are, but we have seen substantial growth year over year. And then with that, the SKU counts are growing. So there's more variety, which cannabis consumers love. So there's more options, there's more for them to choose from. And then drinkers are just becoming increasingly interested in this market because of the different options that are provided. But with all that, getting us to focus it's a bit of a challenge. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but it is. So we're moving really fast. I know Lisa kind of talked about some of the legalization pieces earlier. We are very strict on our legalization, so always trying to keep up with what's going on in the market from that sense. We're working on a ton of other things, and you guys know flower is king, so that's where a lot of our focus really goes. And then we're limited. I am a brand team of one, so very much limited. And we're consistently, trying to figure out the right resources, but then also making sure we get enough of the information to the right people about your brands is super tough. So you guys know this, building your brand is a must. You have built it this far, you're gonna keep building it. So I'm probably just speaking to the choir here right now that, it's just really, unfortunately, pretty much on you guys to build those brands. But I think with that, you don't have to start from scratch. And I would say you guys are in the cannabis industry, you're super scrappy, you're super creative, and you're always looking for something new. And with that, though, hopefully today I can give you a couple of nuggets where you don't feel like you always have to start from something new. So how to start thinking like a big brand. And so my 3 strategies and points for today are really around driving distinction and how you can set yourself apart. 2 would be really around how do you drive solutions. And so with that, it's a bit two-pronged because to have a solution, you kind of have to have a problem. And then 3rd will be kind of around driving occasions. And with that, I have 2 S's of being social and sessionable. And I think you guys have heard a little bit about some of these things today, but hopefully we can dive into them a little bit more. So driving distinction to set yourself apart. And a brand that I've previously worked on that I would use an example in the non-cannabis world would be McDonald's. And so recently McDonald's has really set itself apart, bringing in consumers who never had tried a Big Mac. The brand was completely irrelevant to them, but now they are driving a ton of relevancy and seeing some growth that they never had in the past. And so with that, they're also doing it with the same old menu items. So you go in and get this Travis Scott meal, but there's nothing that operations has changed there. They might just, skip the lettuce, add pickles. So with that, it's a really unique way and a really, efficient way of doing that. And so they've just attracted a different audience by utilizing celebrity endorsements differently than they have in the past. So pushing this a little bit, because I think when we think of innovation, when we think of distinguishing ourselves, it's always you've got to come up with this crazy new product and, completely change the game. And it can be through packaging, it can be through positioning, and just different ways of really bringing a product to life versus having to feel like you've got to do a ton of capital investment, a ton of R&D investment, when that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And with it, we see flattery coming around, as you see other fast food giants replicating that same type of model. So I never knew Nellie's real name was Cornell Haynes Jr., but there you go with that one. And then Popeyes, who's always kind of been within fast food, pushing the bar, is doing it with Megan Thee Stallion. And so with that in the cannabis industry, I feel like heavy hitters, so, you guys heard from Space Station, they're really planning to break through with this brand that they recently launched. And so with it, I think it's an amazing way of flipping the game around tinctures. So within the alcohol industry, brands are very much about creating this exclusivity, creating these experiences, creating this, upper echelon. And so with heavy hitters, you're seeing that through the packaging as well as through the process. And the brand is, doing a lot of cool stuff. And if you guys want to learn more about it, there's some people in the audience to even ask. And with that, they're also driving distinction around their process. Now, I can't explain this process to you, but as a consumer, it piques interest. And so it's so interesting to kind of just see they didn't have to, reinvent tinctures completely, but are really taking some really unique marketing efforts to drive distinction with their brand. And so I would encourage checking them out for some inspo. So number 2, driving solutions, especially against a well-known enemy. And so with this one, I would suggest first figuring out what's the problem, what's the enemy, and then how can you be that solution? How can you be the hero to that problem in consumers' lives? And so a lot of the times, consumers have these problems, but we kind of just go along with it day by day and don't really care much. And there is an opportunity too to be like the challenger brand. I would say probably the most famous challenger brand is like Wendy's, and they go pretty hard for you on Twitter. But I think in today's market, given consumer sentiments, given the last 2 years that we've lived through, really pushing positivity, really making a splash as the hero is a great way to go. So looking back to an industry I've recently worked in would be the seltzer craze. And so in 2018, there was this enemy called the carb. And apparently it just, was born that year. And everyone was about keto diets and wanting to get away from carbs. And the beer industry was declining severely. It continues to see a bit of a decline. And with this, you kind of just saw White Claw come out of nowhere attacking carbs and being able to be that solution. And it's kind of crazy because when you think of like a Miller Lite or a Michelob Ultra, they're not that different in calories and carbs. So White Claw is 100 calories, 2 carbs. Miller Lite is 96 calories, 3.2 carbs. So you're really splitting hairs, but this brand was able to come through, #ClawLife, and a lot of viral spoofs to really go against that enemy of beer and carbs and that lifestyle. I would also say some big things that help them too in really attacking that enemy would be flavor variety, since the beer industry didn't have a ton of that. And then something that was mentioned earlier is just badge value. People want to be excited to carry around a White Claw, so again, this was another way of a brand really breaking through and driving some relevancy with a new audience that hadn't experienced it before. And so you guys heard from Can earlier. I think this is another one that's really doing a great job. And to be honest with you, I almost feel like this should be a movement that all cannabis drinks ban around, of like the anti-hangover and really being the solution to that problem. I think that's a conversation that everyone can have, and you see Can doing it right now, and it's again in a positive nature, because a lot of people aren't really ready to give up alcohol, myself included. So I'm not ready to hear alcohol is the worst thing ever, but if you can be the enemy against my hangover, that's awesome. I'm here for it. And so Can is one that's doing it really well. I would say some other brands that we're seeing in the market to kind of look into would be Artet. And so they're really going after this anti-hangover. They have some beautiful marketing really around how do you build out, the aperitif, the after dinner cocktail and drinks. And they, similar to some other brands, have been putting their products into wine bottles. And then Wonder is another brand on the West Coast that is similar to Can, and they're going after, White Claw is the past, alcohol is the past, and how can we really find that solution to, also being a little bit more mature of a drinker, since there can be a little bit of that bro mentality with the seltzer world now. Cool. And so my last point is really around driving occasions. So how can you be social and sessionable? And sessionable is really something I learned about from the alcohol industry. And it's really a term of like, if I can have you drink over multiple sessions, that means more volume for me, more money for me. So how do you drive that sessionability with your products? And so a brand that's a little bit different that I worked on in the past. So in looking at Super Bowl Sunday, it's like probably the most social of all sports activities, and it's definitely very sessionable because you're sitting there for hours upon hours. It's actually the second biggest snacking occasion of the year, although Thanksgiving's number one, and I don't know if I consider that snacking, but you guys let me know as you go into your Thanksgiving holidays. But when you think of, your typical Super Bowl Sunday spread, it's very much pizza, wings, chips, and it's kind of the same thing year over year. You always hear the pizza companies talk about this is our biggest day, Buffalo Wild Wings, and so there's not much that's been changing with that menu over the last couple of years. But when I worked on Skittles, we wanted to change that. And that's because Skittles is very much a singular occasion, especially for adults. You usually go into a gas station, you maybe decided to get yourself a treat, and so you buy a little pack. And you probably finish it in the car because you don't want everyone to know that, you're 35 and still eat Skittles. It's okay. But with that, how could we kind of help break some of those barriers? So partner to do, a full-scale campaign on really making game day awesomer. And so with that, there were in-store displays, there were a lot of deals, there was, sweepstakes to get tickets to the Super Bowl. But then some other cool stuff that we really tried to do was, one, creating this candy dish bowl. I actually have one. I use it every Super Bowl. And it really helped, drive to consumers, like there is a way to bring candy to your Super Bowl without it looking crazy. They also, put it on Pinterest, and as you were trying to buy products on Instagram, it was inspirations on how to set up that Super Bowl spread with candy being a main factor there. So again, really finding a way to drive different habits and break into those very sessionable and social occasions. And so with cannabis, it's really important that we think beyond 420, beyond Green Wednesday. There's so many different opportunities out there for, your brands to really participate in, just that might be a little bit creative, but there's so much equity in those occasions to already build into. And so with that social and sessionability, you're getting more consumers interested into trying your brand. And then again, you're building up that volume, because rather than someone smoking flower just one time, they're now, drinking your beverages, sharing it over hours long of occasions, and bringing new consumers into the fold very easily for you. So I would just push to kind of think through, is it happy hour, which has done a lot of changes since the pandemic, which is probably in the favor of people in this room. The traditional happy hour of going out dressed up at, a local downtown bar has pretty much gone obsolete in a lot of ways. Consumers are still working from home in many senses, so happy hour is kind of like, I'm keeping my sweats on and I'm going to my neighbor's house. So instead of, going to your neighbor's house and having a beer, how about have a cannabis drink? Brunch is another one where people continuously bottomless mimosas. Who hasn't done that here? So what if bottomless cannabis drinks could be a little, a little bit regulatory issues, but still, it's another drinking occasion where people continuously consume over a long period of time. Brunch, girls' night, book club, I think there's so many opportunities to just market your cannabis beverages a little differently to really drive those occasions. And then a couple of brands I've seen, popping up that are doing this really well. So Tomato Jane is one where it's basically like you've got your Bloody Mary for brunch. All you've got to do is add the celery stick or whatever toppings you enjoy. And then Vivid Oak is really pushing, similar to even some of the other drink beverages, around the Antihangover. And you can see this beautiful wine and cheese spread that really helps emphasize, bringing wine, or just being a one-for-one swap with wine. So super exciting there. And then the last one, which hasn't launched yet, but I think is super exciting, and I feel like a lot of us are anticipating it, is Moon. And so with this one, they're really trying to drive the alcohol occasion. So instead of, your typical tequila, you've got this Jalisco agave, and you do a one-for-one swap into your cocktails. And with that, thinking it's a really, clever way of doing this. The founder is actually someone who used to work on Angel's Envy, so I'm not surprised. And so you can continue to have those cool, cocktail making classes, be that at-home bartender, and it's something whether you're a new to cannabis drinker, drinking a margarita is an easy way to consume. And I think there's a lot of skepticism around like your flower, tried and true consumers. So this is, again, another easy way to bring them into the fold that doesn't feel too confusing and too foreign to their cannabis habits. So just to recap, my 3 strategies are really, how do you drive distinction, so set yourself apart. And remember, that doesn't mean product innovation. That's kind of, how can you think outside the box even with the tools you already have? Drive solutions. So there is an enemy out there that we already talked about. I think banning against that enemy is an awesome way to really talk about cannabis. And don't tell my former employer I said that. And so last would just be driving the occasions. And so we talked about day partying earlier. There's been so much talk around cocktail culture. So there's so many occasions for you guys to decide to tap into. And cannabis doesn't just have to be about 420 and Green Wednesday. Okay. So thank you. Any questions? I know I'm like, oh, go ahead.
You showed Skittles before and spoke about that before. And what are your thoughts on cannabis companies coming in and leveraging intellectual property from other companies, for example?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just took a tour of the black market in New York, and I was like, whoa. So seeing Skittles, Starburst, Nabisco for different products, I do think that there is just going to be such a huge, crackdown on that. So I would say that if that's how you're building your brand is pretty much set up to fail. And just knowing, I've worked with the Mars legal team a ton, that is just a scary space to be in. So I think that I showed other ways of borrowing equity versus, consumers or tapping into the equity of other occasions. But I think stealing a brand, especially a big brand that has a lot more money than most of us do to come after you, is probably a risk. It's a risk I definitely would not take. Any others? Okay. Well, go ahead.
What's next for PharmaCann in terms of beverages? You guys don't have one on the market yet.
So with PharmaCann, Verilife are our dispensaries. We have one very close in Rosemont, if you guys are interested. And then Matter is our own brand. So we currently don't have a beverage, but we are exploring it on the horizon because just like everyone else in here, we see the opportunity. But I think for us, especially just getting New York right now is a really big focus for us right now. But we're always innovating. We're always looking for partners. And we know beverages are a very interesting space for consumers. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much.